Hello friends and divine beings, my name is Bobby and this is Cosmic Coaching. Here we hang out and talk about positive mindset, manifestation, chakras, tarot, and so much more. So today's topic often strikes fear in the heart of men. Today we are going to talk about boundaries. We're going to discuss what they are, how to set them, and how not to be afraid to discuss boundaries with your loved ones. Setting boundaries can feel scary and intimidating. If you're anything like me, you don't want to hurt friends or family members. I put off setting boundaries for a lot of years. And then I realized that by not setting boundaries, I was not living my most authentic, true life because I was accepting behavior that was emotionally damaging to me. I realized that if I was going to become the person that I desired to be, then that meant that I needed to set some boundaries. Okay, so let's get into it. What are boundaries? Well, personal boundaries are the limits and rules we set for ourselves within relationships for behaviors that we find acceptable to us and to prevent unacceptable behaviors. Setting boundaries is a form of self-care. It helps to create a clear set of guidelines or rules or limits of how we would like to be treated. Boundaries let others know what is and is not acceptable. Boundaries honor our wants and needs so that we can feel respected and safe within our relationships. Boundaries are really important things, and I know that they can be kind of scary to think about or to set or to implement, but boundaries are there to really help you in your relationships, because if you know what boundaries other people have and you can respect those, and they know what boundaries you have and they can respect that, it's going to really build a nice relationship with other people. It's going to allow a sense of safety and security within those relationships or those different dynamics that you have, which is incredibly important for those healthy relationships. Oftentimes we have really unhealthy boundaries or no boundaries at all with friends or family or partners. And that lack of boundaries can oftentimes leave us feeling like we aren't respected. They can leave us feeling hurt. We can feel like we're not heard. And so boundaries, healthy boundaries, can help you establish those guidelines that you need to feel safe and secure within those interpersonal relationships. And it gives you kind of a place to start. One of the most important things to remember when you are thinking about boundaries is that boundaries are about you. They're not about the other people. And that's really important to keep into perspective, because you have the right to be treated a certain way and to determine how you are going to be treated. So keep that in mind, especially if people take your setting boundaries really hard. You keep in mind that it's not about them, it's about you. So how do we go about setting boundaries? The first thing that needs to happen when you are setting boundaries is that you need to realize that you deserve respect. That is the most important thing. You have to realize that you deserve respect and you are worthy of being treated the way that you desire to be treated. And you don't have to tolerate bad behavior or behavior that makes you feel uncomfortable. The second step in setting boundaries is to look at the relationships that you already have in your life and look at where you have already established boundaries. By looking to see where you've already established boundaries, it's going to give you sort of a starting point or a foundation of where to build from. So it's important to look at where you have successfully set boundaries, what those boundaries look like, because that's going to kind of give you a really clear frame of reference for how you've already done this in your life. This could be boundaries that you have with family members. It can be boundaries that you have with friends. It can be boundaries that you have with your colleagues at work, professional relationships. So look at all of your different relationships and see where you have already implemented boundaries, because you're going to build off of that. The third step is to identify what boundaries you would like to set in place. What new boundaries do you need to establish in your life, in your relationship, so that you can feel comfortable with those people around you and have really healthy, positive relationships? Can you build off one of those previously set boundaries that we just discussed? This is where you identify what your wants and what your needs are within your relationships. Be aware that boundaries are going to look different when you're looking at your relationships with your friends versus your family versus like your parents versus your colleagues. So boundaries are going to look different based on the type of different relationships that you have with people. So keep that in mind when you're establishing boundaries. Unfortunately, I don't think there's really a one-size-fits-all when it comes to establishing boundaries. Each relationship you have is going to have its own unique set of boundaries. And the final step in setting boundaries is to communicate your needs in a respectful manner, as well as honoring the boundaries and needs of the person that you're speaking with. And that's really all there is to it. It is a very simple process, but it can feel overwhelming. It can feel intimidating. It can feel scary. And so that brings us to the next portion of this video, which is how to deal with your fear that you have when it comes to setting boundaries. So some tips I have when it comes to overcoming the fear of having the discussion of setting boundaries. The first thing you need to do is wait until you feel that you are emotionally in a place where you can have a productive conversation. It's very important that you can maintain your emotions. I am a very emotional person. I am an empath by nature, and I tend to get emotional very easily. And so when I have to have these discussions, I need to make sure that I'm in a place where my emotions are not going to be triggered. And so I will wait until I'm ready. So if I have emotions that I need to process, I'm going to process through those emotions and deal with how I feel before I have the conversation with the other person. Because it allows you, if you can keep your emotions out of it, it allows you to be incredibly focused, and it allows you to really not lose sight of what you're doing and the importance of it. It allows you to really be present. So make sure that you are in a place where you're ready to have the conversation. Another tip I have for overcoming the fear of having the conversation about boundaries is to write down your talking points. You don't need to read off of your talking points verbatim, but it's going to help keep you on track, because when you're having a conversation, especially a hard conversation, it's very easy to get flustered, and then you're going to forget what you wanted to say, or somebody might say something that makes you think of something else, and then you're veering off track. And so having a list of all the things that you want to cover just really helps to keep you focused. Now, remember, during the course of the conversation, you may not be able to get all of your talking points out. That's okay. Start with the most important ones and know that you can circle back in another conversation with the other lesser important items, especially if the other people involved in the conversation start to get emotional. You might need to take a break in the conversation. And that leads me to my last tip. If you feel that either you are getting too emotional or the person that you're talking to is getting too emotional, it is okay to take a break and to come back to the conversation after both people involved have time to process what has been discussed and really think about it for a while. Sometimes if you are telling someone something that is unexpected, something that it's coming to them, it feels like it's coming out of nowhere, right? Like to you, it feels like this maybe has been festering for a really long time, but then when you go to speak to the person, they may have no idea. More often than not, they're probably not going to have any idea that you feel how you feel. And that's why I think it's really important that if you have a long list of things that you want to discuss, breaking it up into multiple conversations, because if you are speaking to someone and you're setting your boundaries and you're, rapid fire, this bothers me, and you don't put your dishes away and you need to do that, and you also need to pick up your dirty clothes and put them in the laundry basket, and on top of that, you never let the dog out, and you also always leave the car on empty and no gas in the gas tank. Like, if you are spitting all this stuff at someone, it's really natural for them to feel very defensive and to get angry. And so I really recommend to take the conversation very slow. If people start to feel emotional, be brave and speak up and say, I can see right now that this conversation is getting emotional. Why don't we take a break think about what we've talked about, process these things, and then come back to this conversation when we've had time to calm down or we've had time to think about it. And then we can resume the conversation, because that's also going to give that other person, maybe they need time to think of things. Maybe, when you're on the spot, it can be tough, right? And they might have boundaries that they need to set with you that kind of tie around these same issues. So by taking that break, you're giving that person the respect of having time to process what they've heard and then to kind of formulate how they want to respond. So it's just giving someone a courtesy. I would love to tell you that these conversations always go really well, but unfortunately, that's just not the truth. And so sometimes these conversations can be really tough and people might not react well. And that is okay, because everyone is entitled to their own reactions and responses. But please remember that you are in control of your own feelings and your own reactions. If someone is not receptive to your need to establish boundaries so that you feel comfortable, that's okay, because that is not your problem. That is their problem. You are not responsible for how other people think, react. Now remember, we always want to treat people with respect. So we don't want to be disrespectful and then if someone reacts poorly, then say, well, that's their problem, I'm not going to worry about it. So as long as you are speaking to that person with respect and kindness and empathy, then you can't be responsible for their reactions. But it's important that you still state your needs and you still set your boundaries. Boundaries are not bad things. Boundaries are very healthy things, and they really help to foster and facilitate really good relationships. One of the things that has come up for me when I've tried to have conversations about boundaries with loved ones is they will often say, well, but that's not how we've always done it. Well, we've never been like that before. Our relationship, we've always done these things. Well, just because you've always done something doesn't make it okay. And you have the right to say, you know what, yes, I know. We have had our relationship, we have been doing it this way for, years and years and years, but that no longer works for me. I need this boundary so that I can feel safe in this relationship, so that I can feel respected in this relationship. Another thing to keep in mind when you're having these conversations is that sometimes it's hard for people to accept responsibility for their portion of something. And so they may want to kind of deflect, I guess. And so an example of this could be when you're telling someone in your life, when this happens, I feel this way. And that person says, well, that's not how I intended it. I didn't intend it. So you can't have hurt feelings because I wasn't intending on hurting you by this action. This is a huge misconception and a huge issue I think that people face when setting boundaries. And the crux of it is two conflicting things can be true at the same time. Someone may have had no intentions at all of hurting you, but you can still feel hurt. Just because they didn't intend it doesn't mean it isn't still hurtful. If you find yourself in a conversation where someone says, well, you can't feel hurt because I wasn't trying to hurt you, or that's your fault, right? They don't want to take accountability. You took that wrong. That's you, not me. You can remind that person that two conflicting things can be true at the same time. You didn't mean to hurt me. I'm still hurt. Both of these things are true. And so by establishing boundaries, even if they didn't mean to hurt you, letting them know, I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but this behavior is not okay with me. This hurts me. And so if we can change this behavior, if you can talk to me with respect, that's how you kind of break through, because people will be resistant when you do try to talk to them about boundaries, or they can be resistant because it's tough. No one wants to admit that they're doing something that's potentially hurtful to someone else. So what's this all about? Why are we setting boundaries? Well, healthy boundaries have some really good benefits. So I'm going to discuss what some of those benefits are. Number one, It promotes autonomy. It allows you to be your own independent person. I find it very difficult to set boundaries with my parents. And a lot of that I think is because, I'm the youngest child. I've been really close to my family. And so sometimes that relationship is not conducive to my autonomy. But by being brave and establishing those boundaries, doing it with respect, doing it in a healthy way, it helps me establish my own autonomy. It allows me to say, I am my own person, independent of this family unit, and these things don't work for me anymore. And this is what I need in order to feel healthy and safe and to be heard in this relationships. Autonomy is a huge benefit of setting boundaries. Another benefit of setting boundaries is it helps to improve your mental health. If you go into a situation and you know that it's going to be very stressful, boundaries are going to be crossed, it can cause anxiety, it can cause depression, it can cause uneasiness, it can cause a pit in your stomach. But if you have well-established boundaries, it makes it so much easier to go into a situation because you know that everyone knows what to expect. They know what to expect from you, you know what to expect from them. And in turn, that eases the stress, the anxiety of dealing with a lot of tough situations. So by setting boundaries, you really are improving your own mental health. Another thing that setting boundaries does is it actually improves relationships. Now, it can be rocky to get there, but once you establish those boundaries, your relationships are going to flourish because everyone is going to know what to expect. And it promotes healthier relationships. It opens up communication. If you feel safe that you can communicate with a family member, hey, I'm really struggling, with this, and I need to set this boundary, and they respect that, you now feel safe with that person, and that is going to improve your relationships. Another thing that setting boundaries does is it establishes very clear expectations. Everybody knows what to expect. You're taking out that wild card. Other benefits of setting boundaries are it decreases your stress level, which we've already kind of touched on, and it allows for greater respect from others and from yourself and for yourself. So in closing, I want to say boundaries are an important and necessary thing in your life to establish really healthy relationships. People in your life who love you and value you and respect you are going to allow you to set boundaries. And if there are people in your life who choose not to respect your boundaries, it is okay to distance yourself from those people. There is nothing wrong with that. You do not have to accept people not accepting your own boundaries. So with that, I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that it helped to explain what boundaries are and how to set them and how not to be afraid to set them. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section down below. Also, I have launched my new website, which is cosmiccoaching.net, not .com, cosmiccoaching.net, and there you can access my course, 21 Days of Affirmations and Meditations, as well as one-on-one coaching, tarot readings, so go check it out. I will also link all my social media down below so you can follow me. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!